On an American network, NBC, Philip claimed the royal family was broke. Was it? Should he have said that?
Well, it was running out of money in terms. It was not a. This was the simple, plain shooting party, as he said. Well, it's a hell of a shooting party where instead of laying out, shampoos and soaps, you lay out condoms, poppers, and lube. I mean, this is what was. The staff were shocked. Shocked.
What if the very person who never missed a royal engagement suddenly disappears from the public eye? In a quiet February morning, a headline hit the internet that made the world go silent. Princess Catherine's sudden withdrawal leaves everyone speechless. The first week of the year, she was beaming at a children's literacy event in Manchester, her smile as familiar as ever. Then, one by one, her scheduled appearances vanished from the palace calendar, replaced by vague private engagement notes, and finally, an eerily blank schedule. The royal palace released a carefully worded statement, a period of rest recommended by her medical team, with a promise to resume duties in due course. But behind the polished words, staff who have served for decades felt a palpable shift. Meetings postponed, the private secretary's bustle replaced by quiet anticipation. Was this a personal health crisis, or the start of a deeper change in the monarchy's direction? Join us as we unpack the mysterious absence, the possible implications for the future of the royal family, and why this single piece of news has stunned the world. When the first whispers of winter slipped through the corridors of Kensington Palace, no one expected them to herald a silence that would echo across the nation. In early January, Princess Catherine appeared at a children's literacy event in Manchester, her smile warm and steady as always, a testament to the vigor that had become her public hallmark. The next week, the royal court circular listed her name under the heading Private Engagement, a vague notation that carried more weight than the bright announcement of her presence the week before. The calendar, once brimming with her commitments, stood eerily blank. The palace's brief statement released on a grey February morning was carefully calibrated. The Princess of Wales is undertaking a period of rest as advised by her medical team, it read. Her Royal Highness looks forward to resuming her duties in due course. The words were reassuring enough to quell immediate alarm, yet vague enough to deflect probing questions. Inside the palace, however, the atmosphere shifted. Staff who had worked there for decades felt the change almost before it was written on the wall. Meetings were postponed without explanation. The princess's private secretary, usually bustling with correspondence, moved through the corridors with the careful quiet of someone navigating a minefield. Even the morning briefings, once crackling with energy, now took on a ethereal tone. "We're operating in the dark," one senior aide confided over coffee in the staff kitchen, voice barely above a whisper. "I've worked through 3 royal scandals and 2 divorces. But I've never seen the curtain drawn this tight." By March, the media's restraint began to fray. Royal correspondents, who had initially respected the family's request for privacy, faced mounting pressure from editors hungry for answers. What had started as speculation on social media metastasized into full-blown conspiracy theories. Was Catherine seriously ill? Had there been a family crisis? Was the marriage in trouble? The palace's continued silence only fed the frenzy. Each day without news became its own headline. On day 42, a tabloid front page ran an archival photograph of Catherine smiling at a charity gala months earlier, the image now feeling like evidence from another lifetime. Inside the palace, William bore the weight of public curiosity with grim determination. At a veterans' charity event in Birmingham, he fielded inevitable questions with practiced deflection. "Catherine is resting and recovering," he said, jaw tight. "She's grateful for everyone's concern and asks for privacy during this time." But his eyes told a different story. Those who knew him well saw the shadows beneath them, the new lines etched around his mouth. He was a man holding something heavy, something he couldn't set down, couldn't share, couldn't escape. Late at night, after his children were asleep, William would sit in his study surrounded by briefing papers he couldn't concentrate on. The grandfather clock in the corner marked time with relentless precision. Each tick was a reminder that the world outside was waiting, demanding, speculating. He thought often of his mother, of how the press had pursued her, how every moment of her pain had been dissected for public consumption. He had sworn it would be different for his family. Now he wondered if such promises were ever truly keepable. Behind closed doors, the truth was far simpler and far more personal. Catherine's medical condition, a significant diagnosis that required her to step back from public duties, was the sole reason for the silence. Dr. Helena Mitchell, her lead physician, had advised that only an abrupt cessation of all appearances would allow for the intensity of the treatment to take effect. The princess's health had been the subject of whispered conversations in her private medical team's rooms. "We cannot afford a relapse," Dr. Mitchell had said, voice measured. "Your health and recovery depend on uninterrupted rest." Catherine had listened, her face setting into a mask of resolve. She had resigned to the fact that her public persona could not afford to be an exhibition. Yet, the advice of her doctor was a call to surrender. She had to relinquish the vigor that had defined her public image and accept a private battle that no one, not even her own family, was entitled to see. The pressure mounted like a storm outside the palace walls. Paparazzi crews gathered in the gardens, drones hovered near the palace gates, and tabloids offered sums that promised to buy the next candid image. An unauthorized medical record leaked online, later proven to be fabricated, but viral enough to stir the already frayed public imagination. The tabloids began to ask for anything that would satisfy the hungry masses, while the paparazzi were no longer satisfied with a mere headline. They wanted a glimpse, a moment, a photograph of the princess in her recovery. King Charles, who had seen the crown through generations of crisis, declared in an emergency meeting that this cannot continue. The alternative to a feeding frenzy was a feeding frenzy of its own, and the alternative was to let the public imagination run wild. The debate that followed was painful in its familiarity. How much to reveal, how to frame it, what words would satisfy curiosity without feeding it. Every option felt like a betrayal of Catherine's privacy, of the family's dignity, of the thin line between transparency and exploitation. The compromise came in the form of a photograph released on a quiet Sunday afternoon in late April. It showed Catherine in the gardens at Kensington Palace, sunlight filtering through leaves. She wore a simple sweater and jeans, her hair pulled back casually, not looking at the camera but at something beyond the frame. The caption was equally measured: the Princess of Wales enjoying a private moment at home. Her Royal Highness continues to recuperate and is grateful for the public's patience and kindness. Some saw it as a welcome sign of recovery, others viewed it as a calculated PR move. Royal commentators analyzed every detail, noting the casual clothing, the natural setting, the averted gaze. Yet no one knew how much that single photograph had cost. Catherine had resisted it for weeks. "I'm not a zoo animal," she had said when the idea was first proposed. "I won't perform recovery for their entertainment." But the relentless pressure and the knowledge that her continued invisibility was creating its own circus finally weighed on her. William had taken the photo himself during one of the brief moments when she had felt well enough to sit outside. Looking at the image later, he saw what others did not: the tightness around her eyes, the careful way she held herself, the fact that this casual moment had taken 3 attempts because she needed to rest between each one. That was the breaking point. If the photograph was meant to satisfy curiosity, it failed. Within days, unauthorized attempts to photograph Catherine escalated. A drone hovered near Kensington Palace. A photographer with a telephoto lens was caught on the grounds of a private estate where the family was staying. Tabloids offered increasingly large sums for any genuine recent image. The morning a leaked medical record appeared online, later proven to be fabricated, but believable enough to go viral. William reached his limit. He summoned the palace's communications director, the king's private secretary, and the family's legal counsel to an emergency meeting. "Enough," he said. And the single word carried more authority than any royal decree: "We're going to tell the truth. Not all of it. Some things remain ours, but enough of it that they can't fill the gaps with fantasy." The objections came immediately. "Your Royal Highness," the communications director began, citing precedent. "The precedent this sets." William cut in. "I care about my wife being able to heal without being hunted. I care about my children not learning that their mother's illness is somehow shameful because we're too afraid to acknowledge it. I care about basic human decency, which seems to have gotten lost somewhere between tradition and public relations." He stood, signaling the meeting's end. "Draft a statement, a real one, run it by me and Catherine, and we're releasing it within 48 hours. The statement that emerged was posted to the official royal website at 6 p.m. on a Wednesday, deliberately timed after the children's bedtime but early enough to make the evening news cycles. It was longer and more personal than any recent royal health announcement. The Princess of Wales has been undergoing treatment for a significant medical condition that has required her to step back from public duties. This decision was not made lightly, but it was made necessary by the advice of her medical team and the needs of her recovery. The princess wishes to thank the public for their overwhelming support and kindness during this time. She also wishes to be clear she is receiving excellent care. She is surrounded by her loving family. And while her recovery will take time, she is making progress. Her Royal Highness asks for understanding as she focuses on her health and her family. She looks forward to returning to the causes and communities she cares so deeply about when she is able to do so. Until then, she hopes the public will respect her privacy and that of her family. The words landed in a world that had been living in the dark for weeks. Some readers found comfort in the transparency, a reminder that even public figures are private people who deserve care and dignity. Others saw it as an inevitable compromise, a breadcrumb tossed to hungry masses to buy more silence. The statement did not answer every question, but it removed the space that had allowed the public imagination to run wild. It was a concession to truth, a refusal to let speculation become the only narrative. In the days that followed, the princess's recovery continued in quiet focus. The medical team's updates, shared privately with the family, were no longer a subject for headlines. Paparazzi drones were banned from the palace's immediate vicinity. The tabloids that had offered large sums for any genuine recent image now found themselves out of reach. The public, still curious but now informed, responded with a mix of admiration and caution. Comments on the royal website reflected the complexity of the situation. Some praised the openness, some criticized the timing, and many simply thanked the family for their patience. And so the story of Catherine's sudden disappearance, the mounting speculation, the palace's measured response, the photo that bridged privacy and public interest, and finally the decision to share a piece of truth, became a chapter in the crown's history. It was a reminder that even in an era of instant communication, the most powerful stories are those that balance transparency with the fundamental right to privacy. The Princess of Wales in her garden at Kensington Palace had returned to a quiet moment, not for the camera, but for herself, and that quiet was perhaps the most powerful statement of all. The truth, once it emerged from the gilded corridors, rippled outward with a quiet inevitability. Catherine's hand, steady over the ink, anchored the declaration in personal authenticity. In the same breath that the statement had been drafted, the palace's own language softened, the formal script giving way to an unmistakable act of transparency, a signature that belonged to the princess herself. The moment the words settled into the public domain, the world did not just absorb the fact of her absence, it absorbed the gravity of her silence. Immediately, the internet breathed a collective sigh. Hashtags blossomed across platforms: privacy, humanity, empathy, capturing the moment in a flood of comments. Ordinary citizens, strangers to the court, began to open their own stories of hidden struggles, of illnesses that had lived behind veils of silence. One mother, scrolling through the viral thread, remarked, "My dad had to keep going on all those appointments until he collapsed, and no one spoke." A young student added, "I'm sick of the never break narrative. We're all human." Mental health advocates, already primed by the pandemic spotlight on invisible wounds, seized the moment to highlight a new narrative. They framed the princess's disclosure as a watershed, an example of a public figure confronting illness openly without sacrificing dignity. Their voices echoed the broader chorus that empathy was not lost but rediscovered. Within the palace, the atmosphere that had once seemed impenetrable began to thin. The days that followed the statement were marked by a palpable shift. The weight of expectation that had pressed against Catherine's shoulders eased, replaced by a quieter, more measured rhythm. She found herself reading a news article about a woman in the city who had withdrawn from her job to treat a chronic illness, noting the relief in the tone. The palace staff, who had long been tasked with guarding secrets with a vigilant intensity, now appeared less like gatekeepers and more like caretakers. Catherine, in her private moments, turned to William with an honesty that had been long overdue. When you're walking a child's hand and you see the fear in their eyes, it reminds you that the public's pulse beats alongside your own, she said. William, with the weight of duty on his shoulders, nodded, recognizing that his own presence mattered as much as the princess's words. Their conversation, a quiet exchange in the garden's hush, illuminated a partnership that was evolving, health first, curiosity second. The weeks that followed were marked by incremental victories. On a crisp autumn morning, Catherine returned to the garden, her limbs no longer encumbered by the burden of expectation. She was seen in a simple dress, her hair loose, reading a letter from a charity worker to a patient in a hospital room. Her eyes lingered on the paper, reflecting a depth of understanding that resonated with viewers who had watched her struggle in the days before. At the same time, William's role became clearer. In private, he organized small gatherings of palace staff, offering a forum where concerns about workload could surface without fear of reprimand. These meetings, though informal, sowed seeds of dialogue that would later manifest in formal policy. When a junior staffer expressed fatigue after a series of back-to-back events, William listened attentively, noting the need for balance. His intervention was not a rebuke but a quiet reassurance that the palace, too, was a living entity requiring nourishment. Then came the semi-public appearance that shifted public perception. On a sunny day, the princess stepped onto the stage of a charity event, her presence unadorned but profoundly human. Photographs captured her laughing with children, her shoulders relaxed, the royal scarf hanging loosely. The media, initially skeptical, praised the authenticity of the moment. One reporter, in a hushed tone, remarked that the image was a stark contrast to the polished, distant persona the palace had cultivated for years. The public, now attuned to the narrative of vulnerability, responded with admiration. Social media feeds overflowed with images of the event, each tagged with real royalty. Comments praised the princess's courage, with many expressing that the sight of a monarch in such an intimate setting made the institution feel less like a distant myth and more like a family. Meanwhile, Catherine's personal journal entries grew more detailed. On a particular winter afternoon, she recorded, "I broke the silence, not for the world's gaze, but for my own healing." This line, though simple, carried a weight that resonated with readers who had followed her story. Her days became a tapestry of small triumphs, reading aloud to her son, walking through the palace gardens with a cane that now felt like a companion rather than a reminder of limitation. Each act, each step, was a testament to resilience. The crescendo arrived with the video message, a raw, unedited glimpse into her thoughts. In that 24-hour window, the video amassed 50 million views. The public, no longer in pursuit of scandal, engaged with the honesty that Catherine offered. The footage, unmediated, devoid of palace protocol, presented a narrative of humanity. Viewers saw her pause between lines, her voice wavering with genuine emotion. The image of a princess speaking directly to strangers bridged the gap between the institution and the people it served. The palace, spurred by the video's impact, convened an independent panel. The composition of the panel, a blend of medical professionals, psychologists, and former palace staff, ensured a comprehensive perspective. Dr. James Hartford's report, stark and unflinching, challenged centuries of tradition. The expectation was not just to work while unwell, but to appear thriving, he asserted. The report's conclusion that the current model of royal engagement mirrored a dangerous, unsustainable pattern catalyzed reform. These reforms were both subtle and sweeping. The new limits on engagements per year, mandatory rest periods, and the policy allowing withdrawal from duties without detailed medical disclosure shifted the operational paradigm. The palace's spokesperson, in a statement rarely seen in royal communications, acknowledged the unsustainability of previous practices. The language was frank, an unprecedented transparency that mirrored the very ethos Catherine had exemplified. The ripple effects rippled beyond the palace walls. Within 6 months, Spain's royal family adopted similar protocols, and the Netherlands followed suit. These changes, inspired by a princess's journey, redefined how monarchies balanced public duty and personal well-being. European courts watched, some skeptical, others eager to embrace a more humane model. Traditionalists, however, voiced concern. An elderly courtier, seated at a long-standing banquet, lamented, "If they are just like us, why do we need them?" This lament, while nostalgic, clashed with a newer generation's desire for relatability. The palace, still evolving, recognized that mystique had value, but authenticity carried a new kind of allure, one that could engender respect rather than mere fascination. Catherine's own philosophy, recorded in her journal, captured this transformation. She reflected, "I am here. I am healing. I am enough." These words, repeated over the years, served as a quiet anthem for those who felt burdened by expectation. The palace, once an enclave of guarded secrecy, opened its doors, not physically but metaphorically. The space left by silence became a garden where humanity could thrive, where a crown was not the sole measure of worth. In the final analysis, the world's reaction to the princess's speechlessness did not fade into oblivion. Instead, it seeded a quiet revolution, an institutional acknowledgement that duty should not eclipse well-being. The palace's new protocols, the reforms across Europe, and the ongoing dialogue between royals and the public all stemmed from a single, honest disclosure. Through the lens of this story, we see that the heartbreak was never in the illness itself. It lay in the prolonged denial of humanity. Catherine's journey from the brink of disappearance to the emergence of authenticity rewrote the rules of an age-old institution. In a world often driven by spectacle, her truth proved that empathy and realism could coexist with public service. The palace, now breathing, stands as a testament to the power of speaking plainly, of letting humanity shine brighter than any crown ever could. The palace's newfound openness, once a whisper, now resonated across every corridor of the nation. It was no longer a rare, secretive affair, it became an ongoing conversation. As the first months passed, the public's curiosity shifted from the spectacle of a princess's speechlessness to the tangible changes unfolding within the institution. Catherine's diary entries, which had long been locked away, began to surface in the public domain, filtered through a carefully curated series of excerpts. Each page carried a quiet certainty: "I am here. I am healing. I am enough." These lines, stripped of royal embellishment, echoed across newsrooms and social media, becoming a mantra for anyone who felt invisible beneath layers of expectation. The narrative moved beyond the headline "Princess Silence" to a deeper discussion about mental health, duty, and authenticity in positions of power. The reforms themselves were as much a story of procedural change as they were of cultural shift. The new protocol limiting engagements per year, previously a suggestion, became a hard rule enforced by a new oversight committee. Members of this committee, drawn from across the spectrum, medical professionals, psychologists and former palace staff, held weekly meetings, scrutinizing each scheduled appearance. They evaluated the purpose, the potential impact on the public, and the personal health of the attendee. The process was transparent, with summaries posted online for public review, allowing citizens to see how decisions were made. Within the palace gardens, a quiet garden of roses and lavender, previously a secluded retreat for Catherine, was open to the public for guided tours. The garden's name was changed to the Healing Sanctuary. The garden, once a private refuge, became a living symbol of the palace's commitment to well-being. The public could now walk among the beds, hear stories of royal service recounted in a gentle tone, and leave with a sense of shared humanity rather than distant reverence. The ripple effects extended far beyond the borders of the country. In Spain, the royal family, often criticized for their own lack of transparency, initiated a similar review. The Crown's Health Policy Committee, inspired by the palace's independent panel, introduced mandatory psychological assessments for courtiers and staff. In the Netherlands, the monarchy adopted a flexible approach, allowing members to opt out of events without the need for elaborate justification. Across Europe, the notion that a monarch could step back without fear of scandal began to gain traction, redefining public expectations of royal duty. Yet, not all reactions were supportive. Traditionalists voiced skepticism, arguing that the very essence of monarchy was predicated on resilience and stoicism. An elderly courtier, seated at a long-standing banquet, lamented, "If they are just like us, why do we need them?" His words, though nostalgic, mirrored a broader tension, the struggle between preserving age-old traditions and embracing contemporary values of empathy and self-care. The palace, ever adaptive, responded by reaffirming the importance of duty while acknowledging that duty need not be a source of suffering. Behind the scenes, Catherine herself continued to navigate the delicate balance between her public responsibilities and private healing. She would often be seen on the palace grounds, engaging with charity workers, not as a figurehead but as a participant. Her visits to the community center were no longer staged but intimate. She listened more than she spoke, allowing the narratives of ordinary people to shape her understanding of the world. In her journal, she recorded a moment when she helped a young mother organize a donation drive. It is in these small acts that the true weight of a crown lessens, and humanity becomes the true legacy. The palace's new spokesperson, a former advisor to the royal household, crafted a series of statements that mirrored this evolving ethos. In one address, she admitted that the expectation was not just to work while unwell but to appear thriving. The spokesperson's candidness, once unheard in royal communications, signaled a paradigm shift. It suggested that the palace was no longer merely a custodian of tradition but an active participant in societal discourse. The language of the statements, direct, unembellished, echoed Catherine's own words and resonated with a populace weary of gilded facades. The transformation also influenced the education and training of royal staff. New courses were introduced, focusing on mental health awareness, compassionate leadership, and stress management. The palace's library, long a repository of historical documents, now housed a section dedicated to contemporary psychological research. Staff could access resources at their convenience, ensuring that the palace's environment remained conducive to well-being. The reforms had a measurable impact on public perception. Polls, conducted by independent research firms, revealed a significant shift. While previous surveys had indicated a lukewarm view of the monarchy's relevance, post-reform data showed a growing appreciation for the palace's openness. Citizens reported feeling more connected to the royal family, seeing them not as distant figures but as relatable, vulnerable beings who, like them, faced challenges and sought solace. In the realm of international diplomacy, the palace's example inspired diplomatic engagements that prioritized authenticity over spectacle. When the crown visited neighboring countries, the protocol shifted from grand ceremonies to more intimate cultural exchanges. Diplomatic missions began to involve shared community projects, such as building schools or healthcare facilities, underscoring the palace's new commitment to tangible service rather than performative presence. Catherine's personal narrative became a touchstone for discussions about the intersection of health and public duty. The University Medical Board, which had previously criticized the royal engagement model, released a statement praising the new framework. The acknowledgement that duty should not eclipse well-being is a progressive step that sets a precedent for institutions worldwide. The statement also emphasized the importance of confidentiality in medical disclosures, a concept that had long been a point of contention. Beyond policy, the palace invested in tangible resources to support mental health. A new wellness center was established on the palace grounds, offering counseling, meditation, and yoga sessions. The center, staffed by licensed professionals, welcomed not only royal household members but also select staff and volunteers. This inclusive approach underscored the palace's commitment to creating an environment where vulnerability could be shared without judgment.